You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, November 5th, 2023, around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Today, we're going to be opening the second letter from what we're calling an interactive mystery by mail game, our Sherlock Holmes case of Peter Farrington. Let me just check in with the chat because something is concerning me a little bit. Someone's saying that there's some issue with the audio. Is that true? I assume we're okay. Everything looks fine here. Okay. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's do a little bit of bookkeeping and then we'll get started today. I've got the lens on my camera that I use when I record reviews. It's a prime lens that blurs the background a little bit with a larger aperture. That's because I've posted a couple of reviews. I posted a review of the Perspectives box, the new deductive mystery game by Matthew Dunstan and Dave Neal, that you can see that blurred a bit behind me here. It's quite an interesting game. If you haven't checked out the review and you like cooperative deduction games, mystery games, it is worth checking out. It's quite unique, quite special, although Rob was pointing out to me that I forgot to mention the game Witness, which bears some similarity to it. I also just posted this afternoon a review of the latest 5 boxes of the Deadbolt Mystery Society that we played. A very brief review, just sort of bullet pointing the ones I liked and the ones I didn't like. What else do we need to talk about? I do hope you'll go check out Greg's board game channel. There's a link on the About page of this YouTube, as well as links to the Discord for this channel and a link to the Board Game Geek Guild forum for this channel where we discuss what games we're playing next, etc. I also want to mention that Nicola, another viewer, has started a Discord group for people who want to participate in this very difficult team-based puzzle online thing called the Galactic Puzzle Hunt. It feels like it's too hard for me, too dangerous to get sucked into something that might occupy most of my mental energies, and I'm not quite at the caliber of puzzle solving as some of you. But if you are interested in this, you could stop by our Discord and then jump over to Nicola's Discord. What else do we need to talk about? Did anyone do anything interesting this weekend? We had a murder mystery dinner party at my house yesterday. For those who aren't familiar with this genre of game, it's a party game that revolves around having a meal, and everyone who attends gets a special character role with some secrets and some clues, and there are a couple companies that make these. They're not typically heavy on deduction. They're more on sort of acting and having fun. And we meet at my house to play this once a year or so, and we had a good time. I'm very tempted to try to make a game myself. It's an interesting area to iterate on because there are different companies doing it and they all have their different style, but it does feel like it's ripe for someone to do some work on it. I've also noticed there's some books on making them on Amazon, so I'm sort of curious about that. Debbie Levy says, it's bonfire night. Everyone here is setting off fireworks. I sang in a concert yesterday with the Halloween All Souls Night bonfire night theme. Interesting. Macon Larry says, I read a great book, but he's not sharing what book that is. Okay, So while we're catching up with the chat, let me talk about why the letter today is the most exciting letter that we're going to get here. To remind you, we've been playing these play-by-mail games and for months on Sunday afternoons, and most recently I've been subscribing to this Dear Holmes mystery mail system where you get a letter each week. There's 3 or 4 of them, and then they lay out a mystery. We try to talk about it and solve it, and then we get the 4th letter, and it solves it, and we see how close we came. And then I proposed an idea. What if someone in the channel wrote a custom mystery for us, listened to our thinking on it, and maybe read a reply from us, and then adjusted the mystery based on our thinking and our requests? And the idea was twofold. One, that they could tweak it to make it harder or easier based on what we do. And the other idea was perhaps they could actually take our responses in some way as actions. And Matt C on the channel said, hey, I'll give it a try. And he's so far way exceeded my expectations in terms of the quality of the writing and how well everything works. And Debbie Levy in the channel has been helping do some editing, and Rob helping with the graphic design of the envelope and stuff. But okay, so here was the interesting thing. So last week we got our letter laying out the case, and let's just look at it quickly to refresh our memory. We got a letter from John Watson laying out the case of Peter Harrington, a cab driver who has changed. He's become distant to his wife, and the wife is asking for our help. Here's the letter from the wife, Isabel Harrington. She describes 2 weeks ago, he started acting distant. Things went wrong. Every so often he embraces me, turns and faces away. Then she describes a couple of incidents, and I've written down some dates, like this started 2 weeks ago, October 21st. She notes a strange incident on October 29th when red wildflowers were delivered. She thought he was apologizing to her. When he came home, he saw them. He got disgusted. He threw them in the fireplace. She catches him in the son's room. He tells her there's nothing to worry about. Go back to sleep. Then she tells us about the last cab ride when he got into a fight with someone, October 11th. She describes a couple other things. One thing that we didn't note originally that I do think maybe we should pay a little bit more attention to, which is her parents stopped talking to her when they got married. She's well off. He's not so well off. But it is interesting that the parents have completely stopped talking to her. And then she says, well, actually, before all this started, there was actually a period where he was especially happy. And it almost seemed like he had some surprise he didn't want to tell her about. Now, my hypothesis was that he's invested. They've got a son, and he seems to be spending his time around the son, especially happy and then especially concerned later. It felt to me like he invested the son's money. He doesn't come from money, and he thought he had done a good thing by making the family money, and then it's failed, and that's why he's so upset. We got a follow-up letter from Edmund Whitcomb, a friend, a fellow cabbie of the family, who says, I trust his intentions completely, Peter Harrington. Then he tells us about some other cab drivers that might know some information. One of them has been trying to get them to invest. And a little more information about the other cab drivers. Okay. And so Watson says to us, hey, if you have anything you'd like me to do or follow up on, just let me know. We wrote a reply. We did this mostly in the actual stream last week, but we were discussing how there are no rules for this game, so we don't know what are we allowed to do, ask for, etc. And we sort of came up with, as a group, this idea that rather than there being restrictions, like you can take 2 actions, you can ask Watson to do 3 things, you could ask each person mentioned for 1 thing, rather than have strict rules, we said, maybe we're going to approach this as an completely open-ended thing. We're just going to write to Watson, tell him some stuff we'd like him to do, think about in a completely free-form way, and then we'll see what reply we get back. Maybe he'll say, hey, you asked for too much, I don't have time, or what you're asking for is ridiculous, or you're too much, I'll just pick the top things. So we came up with just a free-form letter back to Watson, and we had some requests for him. We asked Eddie Whitcomb to check the last ride of the day for Peter. This was the day the wife said he got into a fight. So we said, check the log, maybe plus or minus a day. We're looking for something that would tell us who he got into a fight with. We asked for more information about the investment. We even proposed, hey, maybe you should go to him, go to the guy who was looking for investors and pretend that you're interested in again, try to get more information, because I think he may have invested and lost money. And then we told Watson, hey, by the way, if this guy won't do it, here's an idea for you, how you could approach and tell him you're interested in investing. Then Wiggins, who we're told by Watson is available to do some legwork, we said, can you try to trace down who sent these red wildflowers to the house? I had some crazy idea that this was part of not a wildflower, an investment scam, like the tulips were, the Dutch tulips, a very famous case of people investing and driving up the price until it crashed. Then we asked the wife for more information about this. I think this is not going to yield much information, but we also asked her for some financial information about the household, because I think this is about finances. And then we asked Watson, maybe you could get in a cab ride with our guy and just engage him about investments, see if we can feel him out surreptitiously. And then we said it would be nice, the chat was quite interested in tailing him. I think it's going to be hard to tail a cab driver, but okay. We asked him, maybe if you got time, do it. And then we said, hey, if you don't have time to do all this stuff, here's our top priorities: the flower delivery and the investment. And then we will mention him about the tulip mania idea. All right, but what's so magical about today is we've got our reply here. And we have no idea what it's going to look like. Remember, Matt C in the channel has written this reply based on what we've requested. We have no idea if Watson's going to be like, okay, I've done everything you've asked, here are the answers, or if he's going to say, I don't have time for you guys are acting like amateurs, asking me for a million things. We have no idea. So this is where we're going to find out how this game works, what it's like. So I'm very excited to read this. Is there anything I've forgotten from the recap, anything like that? Let me check in with the chat, find out that. A couple more things. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more games like this. And let Matt know. He doesn't seem to be in the chat today, but let Matt know how much you appreciate him doing this. It does remind me that next week we will not be playing this. Matt's going to have off next week. So I'm not sure what we'll do next week, next Sunday at 3 p.m., but I'll probably be on the air. Maybe I'll do a channel update, or maybe I'll do a developer update of my game High and Low. But we'll do something next week. This is my 3-year anniversary in November of being on the channel. It's had some ups and downs and some has morphed a bit. So, but it's only been 2 months since my last update, so it feels a little soon to do another, but we'll see. Okay. Let's open it up and see what we've got. It seems like no one is saying that I missed anything important. All right, let's open this up and see what we've got here. Be nice to open this up without damaging. It doesn't look like that's gonna happen. Okay. All right, so we've got a letter from Watson. We've got 4 sheets of paper here. Got a double-sided letter from Watson, a letter from Bill Wiggins, a letter from Edmund Whitcomb, and a letter from Lomax, one of our allies. All right, let's start with the letter from Watson. This is extremely exciting to see how he's going to actually respond to the letter we wrote. This is the first time we've ever done something like this, where we're actually getting a free-form reply to our free-form letter, as if we were really interacting with Watson. November 9th, 1889, so 4 days later. Dear Mr. Reichler, past few days, I have assigned your suggested leads to our agents. I shall detail our findings below. Mr. Wiggins undertook the task of locating the origin of the red wildflowers and interviewing Mrs. Harrington. The mission will perhaps open a future career to him as a floriculturist. However, this left him with little time to track Peter Harrington's movements. His letter is attached. Mr. Whitcomb provided the requested fare logs. He was also open to your intriguing plan to learn about Thorne's investment and his Uncle Robert. His letter is attached. As a reminder, per your sub-consulting arrangement with Mr. Holmes, any major expenses incurred by this investigation shall be subtracted from your final payment. Now we have something to optimize. Now we have a constraint that our fees are going to be deducted, our expenses are going to be deducted. So that might make us change what we asked them to do. I took it upon myself to learn more about Peter Harrington. The challenge in hailing a ride with Mr. Harrington lay in knowing his route. I feared that standing near the depot and ambushing the man at the start of his shift would arouse suspicion, so I took a chance and wandered northeast London for an afternoon. It was a rainy, miserable day, but I brought my umbrella along. As the sun began to set and I lost hope, I indeed spotted a carriage with Abernathy printed on the side, but the driver was not Harrington. Rather than let the day go to waste, I got in to see what I could learn. If you could, please take me to Baker Street. May I ask, what is your name? Rutherford, sir. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Rutherford. I recalled Whitcomb's letter, his mention of John Rutherford, the man with many absences. It seemed improbable that I found his carriage on a day I was looking for Harrington's. I thought it best to learn more. Is this your full-time profession, Mr. Rutherford? Are you out here daily? Most days, yes. Sometimes I am not. I have been ill this year, and I have been forced to step away on occasion. I'm sorry to hear this, and I apologize for intruding on such a private matter. Oh, you're hardly troubling me, sir. I continued the conversation and explained to Mr. Rutherford that I'm a physician. We spoke of his condition, which shall remain private, and I naturally built a rapport with the man. I handed him a card for my private practice. He sighed. I wish I could afford a doctor. I'm saving every shilling I can. Actually, for better or worse, there seems to be no shortage of fares these past 3 weeks. What do you mean? Well, it would seem some of the drivers here have come across a great deal of new work. So much so that their usual fares have been coming my way. I already had an arrangement in place with a kind fellow to help recoup some of my losses after an absence. But lately my fares have more than doubled. I fear Mr. Abernathy will not excuse me if my condition worsens, but at least I am closer to helping finance my treatment. Our conversation ended here once we arrived at Baker Street. I tipped Rutherford generously and suggested he call for me at a later time if I can be of service. It seemed futile to ask about financial matters as the man appeared to be scraping by. If I am to return to this task of meeting Harrington at work, I ask that you provide an inconspicuous location and time of day where I am likely to find him, to increase our odds of success. There may be other ways to speak with Mr. Harrington more directly, but we should be cautious. Mrs. Harrington is soliciting our services without his knowledge, and it may cause undue stress to alert her husband to this fact before concluding our investigation. In the meantime, I hope my chance meeting with John Rutherford serves as some consolation. As of this update, we will continue to pursue the other suggested leads from your letter. If new priorities are identified, we will instead divert our efforts according to your direction. Okay, so we asked him to try to catch a ride with Peter Harrington to get information. He didn't quite succeed. Instead, he didn't want to spook him. He ended up with Rutherford, which was someone mentioned in the first letter by the other cabbie. He was the one that was out of work because he was ill, and Peter Harrington had sent him some of his work. And now this guy's saying that there are a bunch of extra people needing rides. I don't know if that's significant for us. But perhaps this told us that trying to get Watson to get a cab ride with our guy is not the most efficient use of our time. Let's see if we had better luck with our next reply. This one from Wiggins. November 8th, 1889. Dear Mr. Reichler, Dr. Watson has tasked me to help you identify the red wildflowers described in Mrs. Harrington's letter. I'm sorry to say I haven't been able to find an exact match or the sender of the flowers. But perhaps this may tell us something about this case. I'll explain what I've done up to now. I started by interviewing Mrs. Harrington at her home shortly after hearing from Dr. Watson, and I asked her to describe the flowers to me. I'll write down our conversation as best as I can. Hello. I was sent by Detective Holmes. His associates are looking into the case, and they'd like to know what you can remember about the flowers that were delivered to you. Oh, thank you for coming. I would say the flowers looked like poppies, but were too large to be poppies. They were several inches in diameter, and there was a white film emanating from them. I cleaned my hands after handling them. I've never seen a poppy grow to this size, but I'm no florist. Could these flowers have been tulips? No, I do not believe they were tulips. Well, actually, I cannot say for sure. These flowers were more open, but the tulips I have seen are usually closed. They were about the size of tulips, so it is possible. I'm sorry, it's hard to remember. Oh, that's all right. What can you tell me about the person who delivered the flowers? I'm afraid the bouquet was left on our doorstep. Whoever left them knocked on our door. When I picked up the flowers, I took a quick look around and was unable to identify whoever delivered them. Was there any kind of note with the flowers? No, nothing. They were simply tied together with twine. There's one more thing that interests us. Could you tell me anything about the finances of your household? Oh, I'm sorry, you're quite direct. Well, we live month to month on our wages, but Peter makes sure they remain reliable. This is a sensitive subject for Peter. You must understand, we married without my father's blessing. It's very important to him that Daniel and I are provided for. He's slowly been building an education fund for Daniel to help pay for a tutor. We do not often speak of financial details, but Peter indicated recently that we were close to reaching this goal. Come to think of it, he has not mentioned it in several weeks. Having heard Mrs. Harrington's account, I set out to find a possible supplier of the flowers. It seemed reasonable to visit local florists in northeast London to learn more. I began with a small shop a few streets away from the Harringtons' home, operated by a Mr. Arthur Hill. We spoke about the flower described by Mrs. Harrington, but he was confused by my request. It sounds to me like your client is describing a poppy or a tulip. But she stated that neither of these is the flower. I cannot think of a flower that might be confused for these offhand, but feel free to look for yourself. I know of a florist named Charles Miller who grows most of my flowers. Return to me later or visit Mr. Miller directly if you wish to hear his thoughts. His home is just outside of London, and he grows flowers on his property. Feeling a bit lost myself, I grabbed one each of the red, pink, and orange flower in Mr. Hill's shop and bought them. Dr. Watson told me that you would gladly cover the expense. On my way back to Mrs. Harrington, I thought it best to not deliver these flowers to a woman myself without her husband's knowledge, and called upon another irregular to accompany me to the Harringtons' home. We showed Mrs. Harrington each of the flowers. She quickly ruled out most, but kept the poppy. As I said, the poppy is closest, but neither of these is the exact flower. It could have been a poppy, but it was quite large for one. We thanked Mrs. Harrington for her time, and I set off to look for additional flowers. I widened my search and visited any shop or cart I could throughout London. If Mrs. Harrington's description is correct, the flower is not sold in London, and London florists don't recognize it. Sincerely, Bill Wiggins. And he's got a little stamp of himself. P.S. Since I'm still finding my way around a typewriter, Dr. Watson was kind enough to help me write this. Okay, well, this was interesting. So we asked him to try to find the flowers, and we mentioned the tulips, and he's actually pursued that lead. And he's actually asked her, hey, is it possible it was a tulip? And she's kind of non-committal about it. She really thinks it looks like a poppy, but she says it could be a tulip. Now, what was this part about the white film? A white film emanating from them. And I cleaned my hands after handling them. What is that about? White film. That sounds important. But what does it mean? White film. He tried to track it down. He went to a florist. He was nervous about bringing him back with alone, so he found someone else. But then he asked her a little bit more about them. She says, tied together with twine and left on the door. Left on our doorstep. That's odd. That is not a flower delivery. That's very suspicious. Whoever left them there, now it does sound more like they're trying to leave a message or something. And then she says something a little concerning that seems to reinforce our idea. They are not rich. They're talking about exactly what my hypothesis was about an education fund for Daniel. And she says, actually, normally he's been saying recently that we almost made our goal, but then come to think of it, he hasn't mentioned it. This really feels to me like very likely confirmation that he was happy. He thought he invested and was going to get the fund fully paid for. The investment has turned sour, and now he's ashamed of himself for losing their money. What does the chat think? Opium poppy. It's opium. It's opium. Yes, it's opium. That's right. It's opium. So he's got himself messed up with opium poppies. But does he know he's involved? Is it illegal? We don't know the history of this well enough. Well, let's keep reading. I think we're on to something here. I think it's investment. I think it's going to turn out that this investment has something to do with opium poppies. All right, we read Watson, we read Wiggins. Now we're going to read Eddie Whitcomb's letter. This is the other cab driver. Let's see what he says. Edmund Whitcomb, 49 George Street, November 8th. Mr. Reichler, here are the fares you requested. I've written down the last ride for Peter on October 10th to the 12th. He finishes his shift before dusk. Okay, so we asked specifically about the 11th, I think, is what the day we think. So we asked, we're interested in the 11th because that's when she said, the wife, that the last fare of the day was scolding him, October 11th, but we wrote in our letter, check the 11th, but maybe she misremembered, so check the days around it. So here's our day, if the wife is right, that he got into an argument with someone who got picked up at 7 Clifton Street, dropped off at Waterloo. Probably these other people aren't important. Probably just this one. Your idea to approach Thorne under false pretense was intimidating, but knowing it could help Peter, I summoned my courage and approached him at the depot yesterday. I asked if we could speak about his investment, as I had reconsidered, and we stepped outside the depot and walked the streets together. Thorne hardly seemed interested in the reason for my newfound interest. This is great news, Eddie. My Uncle Robert is a smart man. He's tripled my own savings, so I'm happy to share this opportunity with you. Would it be possible for me to meet your uncle? It would greatly help to know the man I was doing business with. Thorne seemed hesitant. Oh, this is impossible. I'm afraid he has many clients and is quite busy. He offered to help some of my friends as a favor to me. That is kind of him and you. Did he share any documents that I might review before investing? Well, certainly. I have them at my home, but will bring them to you tomorrow. Would you mind lending me your deposit now? It will expedite the process. I'm afraid I must insist that I review the documents before investing. I have a friend who offered to help me review them. At this moment, Thorne's attitude shifted sharply, and his air of friendliness dissipated. My uncle does not need amateurs questioning his judgment. I can take your deposit now if you wish. But if this is going to be an inquiry into his affairs, I will not entertain it. I took a moment to think this over. Dr. Watson did provide banknotes to give to Thorne if I judged it helpful. But as I was thinking, I noticed a restlessness in Thorne. He fidgeted and rubbed his arms as he stood there, and appeared quite pained by this weight. This made me deeply uncomfortable, and my instincts told me not to hand this man any of your money. I apologize for wasting his time and excuse myself. If you deem it necessary later, I will return to Thorne and give him the deposit. Okay, pretty wonderful. And now we're starting to get a feel that this could be the investment and it's up to no good. So it seems very shady, and everything this guy is saying, Thorne, seems completely realistic. Like, this is a realistic behavior of someone trying to con people into investing. Now, I do want to point out that, like, this makes a lot of sense. He's like, my uncle doesn't want to get involved, amateurs questioning him. If you want to invest, I'll make you lots of money, but if you got questions, go somewhere else. Now, I do want to point something out. It's very possible that there is an Uncle Robert who's doing this, but it's also very possible that the scam artist has just made up a person, right? This could be Thorne, and he's just invented an uncle to be the point man, so he doesn't have to answer questions directly. That would be a common behavior of a scam artist to invent some top person that they report to. So is there a real Uncle Robert? We don't know. Is Uncle Robert real? But I do think it would be very possible that this is the investment with the opium, but he doesn't tell us anything about the business, huh? And then, thankfully, we are not out more money. Doesn't tell us anything about the business, huh? He has many clients and is quite busy. And then, as far as the last cab ride of the day, and he got into an argument with someone about, that's probably nothing. Probably just a red herring. All right, let me check in with the chat, see what people are thinking. Okay, so more discussion about the opium poppy. Everyone is thinking about it. Rob says that's why Holmes is interested in it. Emmy says there are different kinds of poppies. I assume opium poppies would not look like regular ones in the shop. It mentions they produce white latex opium when damaged. So yeah, I think we're very convinced now that the flowers delivered to him were opium flowers, although he may not have known it. I'm guessing moving poppies is the other work the cabbies have taken on. Yeah, you're pointing out that the first letter said the cabbies were busy, more busy than normal lately. Who are they moving? Is that significant to us? And ME was suggesting that maybe they're transporting the opium poppies. Could it be all these new fares are involved in the drug trade? That's what we're talking about here. Debbie says, as far as I know, it wasn't actually illegal to buy or sell opium in those days. It was used in medicines. Macon, where he says, Thorne may have lost all of Peter's money to start the crisis, but it doesn't have to be him who's doing all the flower stuff. That's true. Scam artists would not start in the workplace. I think there's some kind of Uncle Robert that overlooks it. Opium poppies probably wouldn't be sold in forests, which is why the poppies tied to the door look different from those picked up by Wiggins. Yes, yes. Debbie says, maybe we should try a chemist rather than a forest. I don't know that a chemist is going to help us. Maybe the cabbie's co-owner is a big player in the opium trade, company owner. That's an interesting idea that the cab company, could the cab company be involved in this? But then why would this Uncle Robert thing, I mean, it could be totally unrelated. It is an interesting idea. All right, so we've got one more letter from Lomax. Let's see. And then a second question would be, why were they delivered to his house? Why were they left on his door? Let's read this last letter first. Okay, from the London Library. Watson, I checked our encyclopedias for tulip mania because we mentioned at the back of the letter for Watson, hey, have you ever heard of this tulip mania? It seems like Watson has spent our money researching it. He's asked Lomax to look into it. Watson, I checked our encyclopedias for tulip mania. Most of the library's encyclopedias are filed under 031 GPT. Encyclopedias are not primary sources. Additional research may be required to verify. I will transcribe the entry. Tulip mania was a period of intense speculation in the Dutch tulip market during the early 17th century, particularly in the years 1636 to 1637. It is often cited as one of the earliest recorded speculative bubbles in financial history. The mania was characterized by a dramatic increase in the prices of tulip bulbs, which reached astronomical levels only to subsequently crash, leading to significant financial losses for many investors. Here's a brief overview of the tulip mania. Origins: tulips were introduced to the Dutch Republic from the Ottoman Empire. Novelty of these colorful flowers, combined with their limited supply, made them highly desirable. Rapid speculation. Popularity of the tulips grew, so did the demand for the bulbs. Prices began to rise. Traders and investors speculated on the future value of the tulip bulbs. Contracts known as tulip futures were even created for the trading of tulip bulbs, allowing people to buy and sell bulbs they didn't yet possess. One of the earliest financial bubbles. Exponential price increase. Tulip mania reached its peak 1636, 1637. Tulip bulb prices soared to extraordinary levels. Some tulip varieties, like the Semper Augustus, were among the most expensive goods in the world at the time. People were buying and selling tulip bulbs for exorbitant sums, often exceeding the annual income of a skilled craftsman. Then there was the collapse. Tulip market suddenly collapsed. Prices started to fall. Panic selling ensued. Speculative bubble burst, leading to sharp and devastating crash. Many traders and investors who had bought tulip bulbs at high prices suffered heavy financial losses. Consequences: the tulip mania is often viewed as a classic example of a financial bubble driven by irrational exuberance and speculation. It had a significant impact on the Dutch economy, leading to distrust in speculative trading and a decline in the tulip market. It's important to note that while the tulip mania is a famous historical example of a financial bubble, some aspects of the story may be exaggerated or mischaracterized in historical accounts. The full extent of the economic impact of the tulip mania is still debated among historians. Nevertheless, it remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of speculative investing and the potential for asset prices to become detached from their intrinsic value. I sincerely hope this is the final piece of the puzzle in your friend's case. If you decide to visit Amsterdam, I will find you a Dutch to English dictionary. We go goat ontmoet. Yours truly, Lomax. P.S. I can barely remember the last 3 times Wiggins stopped by. I would prefer to see the young man spend more time in the library rather than on the streets. Remind him of his invaluable friend Lomax the next time he picks up some useless toy from Parsons or spends his evenings in the morgue, will you? Okay, so pretty cool. Look at this stamp. All right, so this is what we get for... It's clear that us rifling Watson lots of stuff that's probably not relevant has come back to bite us a little bit, because a lot of time has been spent on something that's clearly not related to our case. But it was an interesting theory that we had, that maybe they were investing some speculative flower market, but we now have a much better theory. So we now believe we're dealing with opium flowers and probably an investment. But our main question, so Lomax's research on the tulip mania was interesting but not relevant. So I think the picture that's being painted here is that Peter Harrington has invested his son Daniel's money, his education fund. And now it's looking like he probably figured out that it's a scam. Or not a scam, but it's illegal. But we don't think drug poppy is illegal per se. And it's possible that the investment by Thorne is separate from the poppies, but it still leaves us with the question, who left the opium poppies at his door? And why? Let me check in with the chat here. Debbie says the opium poppies wouldn't have been illegal, but viewed as immoral. And he says, we need to find out about these new jobs for the cabbies. Perry says the poppies may have been sent as a threat. Jan says, does it make any sense to have opium poppies in London? Shouldn't they be converted to opium at a place of origin? Easier to transfer their final product. What about this guy who has a flower farm? The florist was saying, where is that? He went to the flower shop. Sounds like your client is describing a poppy or a tulip. I know of a florist named Charles Miller who grows most of my flowers. Just outside of London, he grows flowers on his property. He might be able to tell us about opium poppies, even if that's not it. Okay, I think we should send Wiggins to visit Charles Miller and ask him specifically about opium poppies and anything he can tell us about them and if money could be made from them, etc. So my suggestion is Wiggins, let's try to not spend so much money. If we're going to get paid on this job, we can't just be sending everyone everywhere. So I suggest we send Wiggins to Charles Miller to get info on poppies, opium poppies, and profitability, etc. I think, what do you think about the idea of having Watson talk to Lestrade about a criminal activity involving opium in London? Let me find the part about the cab activity going up. He says, I feel Mr. Abernathy will not excuse me. He said, lately my fares have more than doubled. He says there seems to be no shortage of fares these past 3 weeks. So he gives us actually a timeline. 3 weeks. When would that start? 3 weeks from November 9th is around October 16th or so, right? So we could still pursue the idea that he got into a dispute with someone on this fare, maybe related to his investment in the opium stuff. So if I try to think about different angles, one would be talk to Charles Miller the Forest. He could give us some background on opium and thoughts about it. And then another angle would be the October 11th cab ride. We could ask him to visit 7 Clifton Street and see what's there, see if he can figure out if that's a doctor's office. Is it Uncle Robert's office? And then another angle we could pursue is talk to Lestrade or some underground people about opium underworld sales. So maybe Lestrade or maybe Porky would know more about the sale of opium. But what's our theory for what's our theory about the flower delivery? And here's another idea. Might we look for a Robert Thorne? Might we try to find Uncle Robert? Would he have the same last name, being the uncle? He would, right? Father's brother would have the same last name. So we could ask Watson to figure out who this Robert Thorne is, if we think they're connected. Let's check in with the chat. We need to pin down whether the husband actually gave money to the scam artist. Maybe Wiggins could get talking to Whip. That might cause less suspicion than if Whitcomb did it. Flower delivery is a coded threat. Peters backed out when he found out what he was being employed to do, hence the threats. You guys looked at it as a threat, but I didn't. Because when the flowers came, he just looked disgusted, but it didn't seem like he was nervous and worried. But you might have a point. Sending the flowers as a message would make sense. Maybe the investment has to do with investing in the opium and then in the opium flower and then having to deliver it around. And he doesn't want to do it. And he can't get his money out. Can't get his money out. He's invested in the project. But the chat, who said talk to Whip? Because that's a good point. So there are certain people we haven't talked to yet, and Whip was one of them. And I believe Whip had some underground stuff. Let's read this in our original letter. He says, I've known Peter for 10 years. Okay. He said, he spoke to Rutherford, who we talked to, but then two people we haven't spoken to yet. Percival Thorne, that's the guy who's wants the investing, and Wilson Whip Merriweather, who we haven't heard from. So let's see how he describes. Is it possible that Rutherford got like addicted to? No, he actually was in. Watson found out about him. Okay, let's see. Whip doesn't know Peter. Adjacent, but he has his ear to the ground. He's a gossiper, loose-lipped. Okay, and he hangs out at the Pickled Egg. So I feel like that is definitely someone we should talk to. So I think we should ask Whip about the uptake in fares and possibility of opium transport, maybe. And we can find him at the Pickled Egg. Maybe we'll send Wiggins for that, since it seems like it's a tavern that Watson would not be at home in. Possible opium transport and investing, sales, etc. I still would love a better theory about why that opium plant got delivered to him. Okay, so it's a message of some sort. It's clearly a message. Or could it be like, here's the opium, now you have to deliver it? But why would you be delivering little branches of it at a time? All right, maybe I have to admit that the channel is probably like that, right? That it was a warning? The problem is, if it's not illegal, then what's going on? All right, let me check in the chat here. Discussion about asking Whip about stuff. Perry says, at the time, opium was widely used in medicine as a painkiller. It's worth asking for regular pickup spots in the cab records, so could then retry sending Watson to get his cab. We need to pin down whether the husband actually gave money to the scam artist. Maybe Wiggins could talk to Whip, might cause less suspicion than if Whitcomb did it. Peter tried making theories. Peter backed out when he found out what he was being employed to do, hence the threats. Debbie agrees. It seems like a message or a threat. How about investigating the Abernathy company? A bit suspect that many cabbies seem to be doing other stuff. And Rutherford is getting their drives. PJ Monica says, any chance that he's addicted to opium himself and that is causing the mood change? Boy, that's an interesting idea. Amy says, can we check cab records for regular pickup addresses that look unusual? I think we should spend a moment to dwell on DJ Moneycut's theory here, idea. She's describing her husband who's turned distant. Is it possible he's got himself addicted to opium? I don't think he would throw the flowers in the fireplace if that's the case, if he's a drug addict, then, though. I think it's still about investing money. That makes more sense to me. He's invested money into this opium thing. I mean, is it? We shouldn't rule out the idea that if opium isn't illegal, isn't it possible that, like, we shouldn't get distracted by the fact that this drug is illegal now to be thinking that it has to do with this illegality of this operation? Isn't it possible that the investment was in opium and it's not illegal, but it's a bad investment because the government's going to outlaw it or you can't grow it in England? Like, maybe we shouldn't get tempted into thinking that there's some illicit drug angle to this. Maybe it is simply a scam investment in opium, just like many other scams, and it's not that it's illegal, it's just that it won't grow in London and it's a bad investment and he's lost the money. And what's the warning? What's the warning? I'm not sure. Watson would be able to spot signs of opium addiction if he could somehow get to talk to Harrington. However, I agree it's more likely to be about finances. Yeah. I like the idea that he seems distant, though. But I feel like it would be... Macon Weary says, I don't see this as a story about a bad investment. That's interesting. But why would you need... How are you threatening him with... The thing is, like, you work with the guy, right? Like, you already know... He knows you know where he lives and works. So what would you be sending the wildflowers? Maybe it's more of a warning, like, I'm going to tell your wife about the investment, that you've lost all their money if you don't shut up and help deliver these flowers. There's a dog you can hear that just barks constantly. Debbie says there were probably criminal gangs trading in opium just like alcohol and cigarettes today. It's absolutely true. You can have black market sales of items. Still, I'd love to have a theory I'd love to have a working theory for the flowers. Okay, it's clearly a message. It's clearly a message. And what is the message trying to say? The message is saying, hey, we're going to tell your wife about your investment in the opium. Ram likes the idea that it's more about him actually owing money. Yeah, I don't like it because I'll tell you why. If you put all the pieces together, we get the scene where 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, he's especially happy and it seems like he's invested their money and he's telling the wife, we're soon going to have enough money for his investment fund. And all of a sudden, he's telling his son it's going to be okay. It feels like he's lost the investment money. Debbie says, I don't think we can solve the case as is. We need more information. Okay, so what more information are we going to ask for? We're definitely going to talk to Whip. And we're going to ask him about what's going on with the extra fares, right? All right, so last time we did this, there was some discussion in the channel about how it dragged on while I was trying to type up the reply. So I think we're just going to try to bullet point this today. All right, so let's see. So we're going to say for Whip, and then we'll write this up with more appropriate offline. So Whip, we're going to ask about the increased fares around town, or actually, is it increased fares really, or but increased? Ask about the cab drivers' increased activity last few weeks. And we're also going to ask him about the possibility of opium transport / investment. What does he know about the investment? And then someone, we're going to say, someone, this is a maybe, visit the Forest Farm Charles, although that's going to cost us money to leave town to talk to this guy who's outside London. Charles Miller. Ask about opium poppies and sales legality. And then ask Porky about opium sales research a Robert Thorne. These are ideas. We can try to refine these later. Do we want to try to visit this last route he took where he got into an argument? 7 Clifton Street. I guess it's in our list of possible things. Who lives at 7 Clifton Street? That was his last fare. Okay. I guess with this Porky, I'm gonna put Lestrade here. Sales. All right, let me check in with the chat. See. Emmy says multiple cabs are making trips to or from somewhere that isn't just for normal fares. That's why the other driver is getting more than double. We need to find out where they're going. Okay, let me refine this question. I think you're right. So let's see if we can refine this. Increased activity few weeks. And where the cab drivers are going to and from, if not on their normal routes. I think you're right. That's happening. The cabs are being used for other transport. Cabs are being used to transport opium. Is that what's happening that's illegal? This is the theory that got posed at some point. Is what's happening that the Abernathy Cab Company is being used as a sort of drug running operation, even though it's not strictly illegal, although it might be illegal if it's black market opium that's avoiding taxes. But if the cab company is involved in this, we are told that Peter Harrington is a very ethical person. Has he gotten wind of this? Is that what's happening here? Hold on a second. Is what's happening that we're saying, like, what's the message? And he's lost his money. Is it that he's invested in this opium transport, not knowing that that's what it is? And now he's invested his money and he's discovered now that the cabs are doing this illegal. Instead of doing their job, they're transporting this stuff. Maybe they're even scamming the cab company. And now Peter Harrington has discovered it and has said, hey, I want my money back and I'm going to tell on you guys. And the message they're sending him is, your money's invested in this business. You can't get it back. And if you tell on us, you'll lose all your money. Is that what's happened? That's what's happened. It's not that they're threatening him with violence. It's that they're reminding him, if he tells on them what they're doing illegally, using the cabs to transport the stuff, then his investment is gone. That makes a lot of sense. You invest in some business, you think you've found an investment to double your money, you've put your money in, and now you've discovered that the investment is illegal, that the business that they're making money on is illegal, but you can't turn them in without risking losing your investment. And that's what the reminder is. I feel like the reminder is, you're fully invested in the opium. If you tell, you're gonna lose all your money. Is that what we've got? Perry says, I'm skeptical that Harrington would know in a short 3 weeks that he had a bad investment. This is why I'm saying this is this new twist. It's not a bad investment anymore. I'm not postulating he's discovered it's a scam investment, but rather that he's discovered what his money is really invested in. Maybe it's not a scam. It's actually profitable. But now he's realized it's a completely immoral. Maybe it's illegal in terms of how they're using the cabs, etc. Maybe they're skirting taxes, selling the black market opium. But it's not so much that it's a scam investment. It's that now he's caught between a rock and a hard place because he doesn't want to be invested in this. He wants to tell on them. But if he does, he'll lose his fortune. I don't think they're threatening to tell his wife. I think it might be the opposite. They're reminding him that he's invested. If the opium goes bad, if he tells on them, then he loses his investment. Or maybe they are threatening to tell the wife about it. All right, we need to wrap this up and make our decisions. I think maybe Abernathy was mentioned in the first letter. We should prioritize interviewing him. I think you've got a point that if our theory is the cabbies are working for this stuff, maybe we talk to Abernathy about interview Abernathy about use of cabs in illicit activity. See if he has any hint about it, if he could be involved. And I think maybe I wonder if it's Lestrade that we should be talking about if we're wondering how it could be illegal. Let's let Whip give us some feedback about illegal activity, and let's ask Lestrade about whether he has any insight about whether there might be some illegal activity of opium sales. Debbie says, there's a Sherlock Holmes story where Watson visits an opium-addicted friend in a den. He clearly despised the whole business. He definitely viewed it as it is definitely viewed as immoral by respectable people. All right, so here is our list. Let's decide who we're going to ask to do these things as a group, and then we can write these up later. So it feels like we can contact Whip directly because he's part of the people that have been suggested to us. We're going to ask Whip. We didn't talk to him yet, so it's fair for us to ask him a bunch of questions. Wiggins was the person who found out about the flowers and seemed willing to follow up on that. So I think we ask Wiggins to visit this guy. I think this will confirm confirm it's opium. This seems like maybe we don't even need to do this, but I am curious about it. And then Watson, who's handling most of this for us, well, he can talk to Lestrade. That makes most sense. And then I guess we could ask Watson to research Robert Thorne as well. And Watson, I hesitate to give Watson so much to do, but that seems like, and then let's have Wiggins follow this up. Tell him to knock on that door. All right. What do you think about that? Can we find out about the stuff on the flowers? That feels like we know the answer to that. That's going to be opium. Debbie says, who will talk to Whip? I don't think anyone has to talk to Whip. Whip has been suggested to us as one of the people that is available for us to get help. So basically, Watson's just going to send whatever we want Whip to tell us. Oh, well, no, you're right, actually. We're told where Whip lives, where Whip goes to. That we wanted Wiggins to. Okay, so you're right. In our first letter, we're told that Whip, let's see. We're told that Whip has his ear to the ground with rumors, spends his evenings at the Pickled Egg. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to tell Wiggins to visit Whip at Pickled Egg. All right, so I mean, Wiggins is working for us. He's got his days off, so Wiggins we're tasking with most of this stuff, but we're asking Watson to talk to Lestrade and to research Robert Thorne and to interview Abernathy. That makes sense, and Wiggins is doing the legwork. And yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, let's see if the chat is. I need a screen where I can split the chat and the. Do I not have a screen where I've got the chat and the tablet? I don't think I do. I have to make a screen for that. Okay, let's see. Eddie's a cabbie himself. We should ask him about our theories. Let's give Edmund a. I don't think we need to bother Edmund. Let's keep. We're gonna run up too high a bill. Let's let Edmund alone for a bit and talk to Whip through Wiggins. Unless we think we want to send Edmund to Whip. Oh, I know what we should do. I know how we should change it. Let me see if the chat is already anticipating me. Eddie is a cabbie himself. We should ask him, tell about our theories about Abernathy. I have a different idea. I think what we should do is we should let the cabbie visit 7 Clifton Street. He may even know. So instead of asking Wiggins to knock on the door, let's ask Edmund Whitcomb to knock on the door, see who lives at 7 Clifton Street. Maybe Edmund even knows that address. All right, so you've got a reasonable amount for Watson, a little job for Edmund, and a reasonable task for Wiggins. I think this seems right to me. Emmy says, I can see why the other play-by-mail cases had 3 different people going to one location each week. All right, I think we've got a good set here. If the channel in between this week, we've got a week off, so if we can think of anything else, any other theories about why this semi-legal activity would be illegal, I'd like to hear it. I do like the idea that there's some scam going on with the cabbies, or with just the investment is not a total fraud. There's a reason why Harrington thinks can get his money back. Perry says, how many sessions are we limited to? We don't really know. It's all being figured out. Debbie says, will you write up a letter same as last week? If so, I can edit again. And Matt C says, no limit for now. Yes, we're going to write up these bullet points as a real letter. Debbie's going to help us, and we're going to send this off. Remember that we're going to wrap this up now. We'll meet again next week, but we're not going to have replies by next week. We'll have a 2-week gap before we get our replies. I don't know what we'll do next week. All right, well, we've made some real progress. I love how the key insight we've got today is that there's opium involved. These are absolutely opium poppies. So that we have broken the case wide open. We just still don't know exactly who's involved. Hopefully we'll make some progress on that by the next letter. I'll see you all in a week or so. Maybe we'll play something in between. Yeah, interesting. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon.